Hey guys, I'm Jackie Brubaker. I'm an author, a motivational and career coach, and host of That Girl the Podcast. Each week, I bring on a leader in their field to talk about how to stop making excuses and how you can start living your lifelong dream. That Girl the Podcast is based on That Girl the Novel, which is on Amazon to download or buy the paperback of. You can also follow us on Instagram at That Girl the Podcast and our Patreon page. Welcome, Ryan Montis. He is a hypnotherapist and a very cool guy. Welcome to That Girl the Podcast.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Very happy to be here. And thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast.
Thank you for coming. I like people to describe what they do and who they are because I feel like you always do a better job than I can. So if you could just give a brief introduction of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So basically, what I do is I teach empowerment, and I teach others to first empower themselves and then to go out and empower others. And the tools that I give them include tools to access the power and the resources, the vast resources of the unconscious mind. Primarily hypnotherapy, a modality called NLP, which stands for neuro-linguistic programming, and then another modality called TLT, which stands for timeline therapy techniques. So with these tools, I give people the power to access their own unconscious mind, clean up the pain of the past, install new and better beliefs, attitudes, and values that are much more in alignment with whatever their goals happen to be in life. And then once they've got all that, I teach them how to use those tools to go out and do it for other people. So mainly my business is running training courses to hand these tools and experiences to people who want them.
So then are you working more with clients who are starting hypnotherapy more so than teaching, or is it equal?
I do more teaching than I do one-to-one client work. So my focus is mainly teaching new coaches, new hypnotherapists, and getting them certified so that they can use these skills. I do work one-to-one with clients occasionally. It's by request and by application only because my focus is on the training. But in terms of the types of clients that I've worked with, it's been quite broad. When I was focusing on one-to-one work, I was what you might call a generalist. So I helped people with a range of issues, smoking cessation, weight loss, motivation, unresolved negative emotions, limiting beliefs, you name it. Anything that was in the wheelhouse of an unconscious mind worker, I was there.
That's very cool. So start from the beginning. How did you first hear about hypnotherapy, and when did it occur to you, like, I need to start learning this?
Yeah. So it kind of goes way back, actually. This is now my first business, but it's my third career. So a number of years ago, I was actually a private detective. I was a private investigator.
Oh my goodness. That's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you. That was my first, real career, real job. And so I spent much time on the road. I was actually a field surveillance operative. So I would spend a lot of time doing stakeouts, following people around, watching buildings, watching people. And, it had its ups and downs, and it had its pluses and minuses. And it gave me a lot of time to sit in vehicles alone, not doing much. And so while my eyes were generally occupied, my ears were not. So when, the novelty of music and other stuff wore off, I started listening to audiobooks, and I started listening to audio training courses. And I started, expanding my mind that way. And that's what sent me down my self-development and self-empowerment journey. Back then I had trouble with anxiety and social anxiety and shyness and all kinds of things like that. And so I started listening to books about that. And then that got me into autobiographies of successful people and all these different topics. And I started to notice what I would call a common thread or an unspoken theme amongst all of these people who had overcome the problems that I had overcome and who had overcome other significant problems. And that common theme was accessing the unconscious mind, everything that was happening outside of their own conscious awareness, and finding out what limiting beliefs they have or had that were manifesting as negative results in their life. And so that was what opened my eyes to things like hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and at the time NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which is another means of accessing the unconscious. From there, I finished my career as a detective. I was in the military for a while. And some of the things I observed in the military, I was with the Canadian Army for about 5 years, was that a lot of their training tactics and techniques and a lot of the psychology of being a soldier very much resembled the teachings of hypnosis and NLP trainers. Not the content, of course, was different, but the context of learning and the intensity of learning and changing beliefs was there, present in my training as a soldier. And then I left the military, left that career behind, and I decided it was time to start my own business. And initially, I thought I was going to get into law. I had a background in the military and private investigation, and so I started studying law at school and finished a program with honors. And towards the end of that, I thought, I could really spruce up my self-confidence and sales ability and persuasive ability a little bit more. And so I decided to invest in formal training in hypnosis and NLP because up until then it had only been self-study, purchasing courses online and watching lectures and stuff, but no actual formal training. So I went and I did a formal training course. It was about 8 days long, and it massively changed my life. It far, far, far exceeded my expectations. I was able to release so much pain in the past and limiting beliefs and learn about myself. And, I came out of it a different person and a better person. And having had that shift, it was so monumental for me. I decided at that moment that I was actually not going to focus exclusively on law. I was going to start a business in teaching what I had learned, hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, and another modality called timeline therapy techniques. And that's what led me to where I am now, where this is my full-time business. Yeah.
And how long have you had this business?
I started in January 2020, just a few weeks before everything went kind of haywire where I live. Yeah, I ran a couple of courses in January, and then I ran one course in February, and then I went out for a conference, coaching conference in Los Angeles. And just as I was getting, exactly, right. Just when I was getting back is when, everything was starting to shut down. And so prior to that point, I had been running in-person training, live in-person training, in conference rooms at hotels, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I needed to pivot. So amidst the pandemic, I pivoted everything online, and now it worked out well for me. I'm happy to say. I know a lot of people had a hard time last year, and they're continuing to, but I was able to thrive by just pivoting everything online and running my courses online, seeing my clients online. So it did work out well for me.
What did you feel like when the pandemic started to really hit and you've just started a brand new career and you've literally been doing it for just a few months? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it was like panic or anything like that. By that point, I had gone through and I'd spent the time, money, and energy to become a trainer of hypnosis and NLP. And nobody does that without getting really good hold on their own emotional stability and taking really good control of their own life and circumstances. So when it happened, I just saw it as, another challenge. I'm reluctant to say opportunity. That might be a little bit over optimistic, although it did turn out to be quite a good opportunity for me. It was just a matter of, correcting course and adjusting my plan to the new reality. And, I can't say that I'm exceptional or a genius or anything like that. Really, it was the tools that I had learned, that I'd taken the time to invest in learning and absorbing, that gave me the power and the confidence and the behavioral flexibility to really get through last year. Because you're right, it was an awkward time to be starting a business, particularly one that involved face-to-face training. But having been a self-empowerment trainer, that was my business, so it turned out okay for me.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I thought you had been doing this for years and years and years, which you have been, but professionally, just a year.
Yeah.
So when so you're in law school and you're just like I'm just more passionate about this? Or when was the moment when you knew, like, I want to create this business? I'm done with law.
Yeah, so I never really decided that I was done with law.
Okay.
And I'm still kind of, it's still a big part of my, part of my heart. And I have family working in that industry as well. So it's something that I would say it's more so, back burner is not a good term, but it's still in my mind, still in my heart.
Sure.
Although now I have a whole company teaching hypnosis and hypnotherapy
Right.
and NLP. But the shift happened on a particular day during that formal training course that I mentioned earlier. So I was almost done my training, studying law. I don't want to give people the wrong idea. It wasn't really law school per se. It was a college program where I was training to become a paralegal, in
Okay.
fact, which is a licensed position in Canada. But anyway, so it was in that NLP hypnosis training course. So about 2/3 of the way through, we did a set of techniques that revolved around removing unresolved negative emotion. So we went through and we used these patterns to clean up unresolved anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, shame, rage, all of these things that most people have running under the surface to some degree or another.
Mm-hmm.
And then to address limiting beliefs at the unconscious level as well. And for me, having been, a soldier and a private investigator for a number of years, I was carrying some very, traumatic memories with me
I can only
that
imagine.
manifested. Yeah, right. And they manifested in unpleasant ways sometimes in my day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was one afternoon during that training course where we finished those processes and we were just having a class discussion. And somebody said something that normally would have triggered very unpleasant memories for me, very unpleasant, right? And, I sat there in the room and kind of braced myself for bad feelings, for what you might call an episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't come. It didn't come. And I sat there and I remember like clenching my fists and closing my eyes, and it didn't come. And then after a few seconds, I like opened my eyes and looked around at the very different world around me, realizing that everything was different. And I sort of sat there thinking about what had happened and going through memories in my mind that used to cause significant pain for me.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing that while the memories were there, the learnings were there, the people were there, all of that emotional discomfort and unresolved negative emotion was gone. The pain had been disconnected, and the memory remained. And it was at that moment where I realized, I couldn't hold these tools and these experiences for myself. I had to bring them to the world. I had to share them with other people.
So that's very powerful. And I think that's a great place to start understanding more about what hypnotherapy is and how it works. I did hypnotherapy for at least a year, maybe even like year and a half. And the way I even ended up doing it was a friend of mine was in school and he's like, I need a guinea pig. Like, will you be a guinea pig? And I was like, sure, I need help. So yeah,
Yeah.
this was quite a while ago, but I remember going in thinking, this isn't going to work. This is silly. Like, I'm just going to be a good friend, show up for him. And we did the session and we had talk therapy first, and then we did the actual hypnotherapy. And afterwards, I was like, well, that was nice, but I was like awake and like I didn't feel like I was out of my body or anything. Just everything
Yeah.
was, I was super aware. And I left thinking, okay. And I think we were seeing each other like once a week or something. So then I kept seeing him, and to this day, I still do not remember what we worked on in our first session. That's how powerful it was. My brain was like, oh, let's make new neural pathways right now. And it was just done. And I was like, oh my God, this is really working. And also the one thing that I love too is that it wasn't very hard. It's such an amazing way to get in touch with yourself. But when you think that you are done, you're like, I have fixed it all. I have gotten all the stuff figured out. It's like an onion, and you just keep finding more that you're like, oh, wait, that needs to be polished and that needs to be fixed. And it's just a beautiful experience. Like, I have told so many people to do hypnotherapy when they are really, and it's not even struggling with like an addiction or something. I was just struggling with life.
Yeah.
It was just life stuff. And I'm actually not a very addictive person at all. So I'm not at all that person. But yeah, I really needed like therapy. And man, it was just some of the best therapy I've ever received to this day. So let's talk about why hypnotherapy, how it works, and why it works.
Yeah. So how it works is that, hypnosis, which is used in hypnotherapy, is the bridge to the unconscious mind. It gives us access to the unconscious mind. And, to understand how hypnotherapy works, it is helpful to understand what is the unconscious mind, because that may be new information for a lot of people. And so, I think most people have heard that we have an unconscious and a conscious mind, or some people might call it a subconscious and an unconscious mind. And for intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same, the unconscious and the subconscious. However, the easiest way I can explain what is the unconscious is just to say that it's everything that's outside of your conscious awareness. So anything that's in your conscious awareness, either you or the listeners, at any given moment is in your conscious mind, and everything else is in your unconscious. So that would include all memory, all beliefs, all values, the emotions that you feel, all of your experiences, all of your patterns of behavior, whether they're limiting or empowering. Everything that makes a person who they are truly originates deep in their unconscious mind. Okay, and so the easiest way and the quickest way to make change is to access the unconscious mind. Trying to force change through hard thinking sometimes can be counterproductive. Right? Often it's slow, or it can even be counterproductive. So the power of hypnotherapy and NLP and any of these tools that access the unconscious is truly in bypassing the part of you that often sabotages your success or your attempts for change, which is in fact your conscious mind, your overthinking mind. Some people might call it the monkey mind. There's different ways to describe it. And in between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind is a barrier called the critical faculty, which 99% of the time protects us, right? Mm-hmm. It's what allows us to defend ourselves against things like lies or misinformation, or just from absorbing any new belief that parades in front of us. But sometimes it can work to our detriment, where we want to make a change at the unconscious, where we want to change one of our beliefs or our patterns or habits or something. But this critical faculty, which is designed to protect you, can stop that. And so it's with hypnotherapy or NLP that we can bypass that critical faculty and access what's going on in the unconscious mind, find out what's going on if we need to find out, make changes that are meaningful, rapid, and long-lasting. And so in order to do that, a hypnotherapist or another practitioner has a series of tools, series of modalities that allow them to hypnotically bypass that critical faculty and make the changes that are appropriate for either themselves, if they're working on themselves, or their clients.
Okay, hold on. I have to cough.
Yeah.
I was like, he's going to come to a period. I can feel it. What's funny about coughing is that when I was in hypnotherapy, as I would get deeper into going into it, my body would absolutely resist. I would cough. I would get the tickle that I have right now. I swear it's because we're talking about it. I would get this tickle out of nowhere because your body's like, no. We don't want to go further. This is scary. We are vulnerable. Your body will actually twitch. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Let's talk more about that actually, because that's really unexpected. A lot of people wouldn't think that would happen. Let's talk about how your subconscious is, like you just said, that part of your brain is trying to protect you.
Yeah, your subconscious is making every effort to protect you. Your unconscious is doing that. And the unconscious mind has what's called prime directives, which is basically a set of mandates that the unconscious mind, and this is universal amongst humans, the unconscious mind is looking out for. And there's a hierarchy of these prime directives. Yeah. And the very highest one is to protect you, is to protect your life, your body, and your being. And so it's not so much that it has a perfect definition of what is a danger to you and what is not, because ultimately you and I consciously know that hypnotherapy is no danger to you, right, and is for your betterment. But your unconscious mind is sort of trained to be reluctant towards things that are unfamiliar, right? Unfamiliar territory, right? Which I suspect, as you pointed out, is what was going on with your experience. The unconscious mind can't just come out with sentences and say, "Hey, I don't like this hypnotherapy. Let's stop." It can't communicate with the outside world that way, but it can communicate through, seemingly unconscious behavior such as coughing or pain or things to disrupt situations that it's uncomfortable with. And so, that's just a matter of the unconscious mind like you said, feeling uncomfortable with a situation. And the way I teach hypnotherapy, I always factor that into the process for my students. For my students that are becoming hypnotherapists, we want to preempt any resistance from the unconscious mind for the betterment of the client, for the sake of the client getting the change that they want. And one of the best ways to do that is before we do any kind of, hypnosis induction, before we get into any kind of hypnotic language, is to explain to the client all about hypnosis, what's going to happen, to set up positive expectations in their mind, and also to alleviate any fears that they may have either consciously or unconsciously about hypnosis. So one of the big things that makes it, challenging for a person to really surrender to the hypnotic process is any myths or misunderstandings or misbeliefs that they have about hypnosis, because everybody's heard the word hypnosis. Therefore, everybody has some idea of what it may or may not be. But most people don't have an accurate understanding of what it is. They've learned about it from movies or television, or they've seen stage hypnosis shows like on cruise ships or back in college or whatever.
I'm still questioning how those happen,
You're still,
actually.
yes.
I'm like, they're joking, right? This is like a setup, because that's not real.
Yeah, actually, I joke with my students. I spend a whole about a 15-minute module on my courses teaching them how stage hypnotists do what they do, and sort of spoiling the magic behind it, because stage hypnosis very much is a mixture of real hypnosis, but also showmanship and illusion, right?
Definitely.
To create this entertaining show, right?
Yeah.
The problem with that, just like you say, is that if people believe that's reality and that a stranger can, say a few magic words, wave a watch, and take control of their mind, obviously part of them is going to be reluctant when they're sitting in the hypnotherapist's office.
Totally.
Right? So a big part of, bringing a client in is just making them comfortable, communicating to them that they're going to be in total control of their mind and their body and everything during the session, and that it's actually impossible in a hypnotherapy session for anybody to make them do anything that they would be uncomfortable with, or that would make them feel silly or embarrassed, or to make them, some people have the idea that they'll reveal all their deepest, darkest secrets as soon as they go into a hypnotic state. And that's certainly not the case. And when we alleviate all these myths, and there's other ones around it, and give a client or a person a really good understanding about what hypnosis actually is all about in a therapeutic or a clinical setting, generally they're much, much, much more ready and able to go into what we would call a trance state, where they have access to their unconscious mind to make changes.
So walk our listeners through what a session would sort of look like from start to finish, so that they have an idea, if they're interested in this, what they can expect.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And, I'll start off by saying it's going to be totally different depending on who you see. There are many, many different schools of hypnotherapy, many different hypnotists and hypnotherapists and NLP practitioners out there. So I'll give you, a general idea of what a session might be like. But if there's anybody out there, who's listening and has done hypnotherapy and they're saying, well, my session was completely different, I would say, good. Yes, I agree. It probably was completely different, because there's many different styles. But one of the fundamental ways that we can run a hypnotherapy session is, first of all, like I said, the first thing would be building rapport with the client. So you go to see a hypnotherapist. You want to have some connection. Before you even get into talking about hypnosis, the client should feel comfortable. They should know, like, and trust the person that they're sitting across from, whether it's via Zoom or in person in session. That's probably one of the most important things, is building rapport between the client and the hypnotist, right? The next step up would be, as I mentioned, demystifying hypnosis, removing all the fear, all the misconception, all the nonsense, and all the unrealistic or scary expectations that they might have about the process. Because even though a person, has sought out hypnosis and has maybe invested money and has invested time, they still may have some, limiting beliefs around what it is or some fears. So the first step there, after establishing rapport and comfort, is to remove those fears and misconceptions. The next step would be to give the client a good understanding of what to actually expect. What is actually going to happen during the session, right? And that just goes to, again, build rapport and comfort. And it actually makes the hypnotic process work better. If the client has some understanding of what's going to happen, why hypnosis works, why it's effective, because that information goes into the unconscious mind. And then when we have, when we have both the conscious mind and the unconscious mind on board for the session, everything's going to go smoothly. Everything's going to be enjoyable. You won't get those, hopefully won't get those coughs or pains of discomfort during the session. So that's the next part. After that, if it were me running the session, I would probably do a good conscious talk with the client about what precisely are their goals for the session. Why are they here? And it goes a little bit deeper than that. It's clients has their eyes open at this point. They're totally conscious at this point, but we're asking questions that's going to elicit some of the deeper thought processes, right? The client may come in saying, that they want one thing, they have one presenting problem, so to speak, but it may be indicative of a deeper root problem, or it may be indicative of another desire, which is either inside or outside of their awareness. But this is the information gathering section of the session, where the hypnotist, the hypnotherapist, is getting all the information they need to give the client exactly what they want when it's time for change work, to give them to help guide them to the place where they can reach exactly the result that they do want.
And when you say guide them, are you talking while they're in trance, guide them, or sort of objective? How do you mean that?
Both. Mainly while they're in trance. Mainly this is gathering information to use while they're in trance, and we have access together with the unconscious mind to make the changes they want. But a lot of the hypnotic process happens when the client is not in trance. There's so much value in the conversation that occurs at the beginning and end of the session, at the sort of the rapport building and ratification portions of the session, as I would describe them. And so, I tell my students that the hypnosis doesn't begin when the client is being guided into trance. The hypnosis begins the moment the client finds your website, or the moment the client hears that hypnosis might help them, or the moment the client books an appointment, because that's the moment that the wheels start turning at the unconscious level for the client. That's the moment that they start imagining, what is life going to be like after this process is complete and successful. And as soon as a person imagines that, they've already entered into an act of self-hypnosis. They're already starting to program their unconscious mind. Now we're going to accelerate that, and really boost it up during the session. But really, the hypnosis is all of this combined to create the hypnotic change. But to answer your question, it's eliciting information mainly to use during the trance stage of the session.
Sorry, go on.
No, sorry, please go ahead.
Well, because I know so many people are probably going to be like, all right, I really need to know more about this trance situation. What is that? Do you, am I just explain how that works? Because I know there's a lot of mystery with that. And for you and I, there's no mystery whatsoever. But for someone listening, I think they're like, okay, cool. This sounds great. But then what then happens when I'm sort of awake, sort of not awake?
Yes. Excellent question. That, and that, I think you're right. I think that's what the listeners really want to hear about. So after the information gathering phase, it's almost time to go to guide the client into trance. And, again, just like it's important to understand the difference between the conscious and the unconscious, it might be good for people to understand what is trance, right? What is a trance? When are we in trance? And the surprise for most people is that if you're a human being and you're alive, you've been in trance thousands or hundreds of thousands of times throughout your life. Most people go in and out of trance many times every day. I mean, a conservative estimate would be 30 times a day, but A more realistic estimate is that people enter and exit mini trances hundreds or thousands of times per day, because a trance is merely a moment of increased focus, okay, which is aligned with communication between the conscious and unconscious mind, right? There's different kinds of trance, there's different levels of trance, depending who you ask. But for example, anytime you're watching television and you're really focused on what you're watching, well, that's a type of trance. In fact, a person wouldn't be able to enjoy or consume information from television if they weren't able to enter into a light trance in order to do that. Anytime you're doing behavior without really thinking about it, what you might call unconscious behavior, such as driving, that's a form of trance.
Totally.
There's this phenomena called highway hypnosis
That's
where
me.
that's you, right? You drive the
Yes.
same route often enough.
Yep.
Eventually, you only remember the part where you left your house and you got to the destination. Everything in between was like your mind was somewhere else completely. And that's because your conscious mind was free to wander off and think about the news, think about, the agenda for the day, because the unconscious mind was running the show, right? So the big revelation is that people go into trance and don't even realize that, they're in trance. And so part of the hypnotic process with a hypnotherapist is, giving people realistic expectations about what it's going to feel like. Otherwise, we have this risk if people go through the whole process and come out and say, well, I heard everything you said.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was really in trance. And the secret is you're going to hear everything. A person who's in trance is going to hear everything. In fact, they're going to have greater focus, greater attention on what's going on. So at its very basic level, we tell people, don't expect to feel hypnotized, just expect to feel relaxed. Just expect to feel relaxed. And with my clients in office or on session, I might just have them close their eyes and sit quietly for a second or two, and then just say, see, that's pretty much all it's going to feel like. Changes will occur.
Yeah.
We will access the unconscious mind, but there's no sensation of blacking out or massive amnesia or any of these things that some people might come into the session expecting.
Absolutely. It is really just that simple. I think you did such a good job of describing that. And I think that's a very easy way for people to really get it too. Because when you are on autopilot, whether you're driving or watching TV or even talking to someone, you can go on autopilot then too.
Yeah.
It's really there. You're still there. You're just you're a little more loose. You're a little more relaxed. And that is really it. In my, coaching, I talk a lot about, you know, visualizing and your energy and really just like feeling the feelings of what you want and where you want to be. Very much just the law of attraction, really.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful, and it can sound like such hooey to some people, but it is so powerful that you find yourself in these trances all day long because you are constantly using these practices of visualizing what you want, literally feeling it, and then releasing it and doing it all the time. And that's, a vibration that attracts like vibrations.
Yes.
And that's the most interesting thing with hypnotherapy is that you are able to go inside, create a new neural pathway that your brain is like, cool, we're going this way now. All right, we go this way. And then it changes your life like immediately. It's so incredible. And it's very much the same as what I'm doing, just kind of slightly different,
Yeah. I agree. Hypnosis happens all the time. All the time, people are using hypnosis, even with intent, and just calling it by other names, right?
Yeah.
As you say, sometimes I mention the law of attraction during my classes, even though my classes are very much, based in science. Everything that I teach is based in science, and the history of hypnotherapy is rich and goes back many hundreds of years. And it's actually been medical doctors and doctors who have been the ones who have, caused the proliferation of hypnosis and hypnotherapy. I think a lot of people don't realize that. They tend to believe it's this like woo-woo thing or this spiritual thing, and it can be if you want it to be,
Sure.
or it can be this very much grounded in science thing. And like you say, it's similar to the law of attraction in that It's programming your mind. The law of attraction, you might say, is based around self-hypnosis. Or if
Absolutely.
you might ask somebody else who might say, well, maybe it's self-hypnosis that is based on the law of attraction. And I
Which
would
happened
say,
first?
yeah, and I would say it doesn't matter as long as the client's getting results.
Absolutely. For yourself personally, where do you find yourself using hypnosis the most now? I'm sure it's changed so much since you began and where you are now, but what areas do you find that you're really using more of it these days?
Like for myself personally,
Mm-hmm.
for me, something magical has happened actually, and it's that it's just become automatic. I tell my students that having hypnosis and being in hypnosis and being in trance is sort of like exercise for the mind, like sort of like good, fun exercise for the mind. And it does this magnificent thing where you create conscious, unconscious rapport. You create conscious, unconscious rapport. You build, which is very much a muscle. The more you use it, the more you build it. And, for me, I'm in this very lucky position where I'm constantly talking about hypnosis, constantly going in and out of trance with intent, teaching about hypnosis, doing hypnosis. And it's created, I'm happy and grateful to say, fairly strong unconscious conscious rapport for me, to the point that I can, make the changes without formal hypnosis anymore.
Right.
Right. So even recently, I just basically decided that I would stop drinking caffeine.
Oh,
And
good
I
job.
decided, yeah, thank you. Personal choice, not a popular decision for a lot of people, but basically it was an instantaneous act of self-hypnosis where I made the decision. I decided I wouldn't have any withdrawal symptoms personally, and I decided I would be happy about it. I decided I would not feel as if I was being deprived, and I would only reap the benefits of being free of the dependency on caffeine that I previously had. And I don't think I would have been able to do that so easily and so pleasurably, several years ago before I reached the level that I am at now. So that's
Because
a fun example.
that's awesome. And I think that's a great example because it really just goes to show you that like it is always mind over matter. You're telling your body what you'd like it to do and what to expect. And if your brain is like, okay, I'm gonna have all these withdrawal symptoms, this is gonna be really hard, I don't even know if I'm gonna make it. Most likely that's exactly what's gonna happen to you. Like, I would say like, you're putting it out to the universe, like that's already gonna happen to you. Like you're saying, you're declaring it. But it's true. It is your brain, just your conscious is telling your subconscious that's what's happening. But instead, you have been working this muscle and it has been getting so much stronger. And that's the great thing about this is that you can just be like, yeah, no, I'm just going to stop. And with change, I do believe this is absolutely true. If you really want to change something, it is not something that has to take a long time. It's truly a decision. And when that fire is there, I talk about this a lot, when that fire is there to change something, you do it. Like you do not think twice. But when the fire's not really there, that's when you kind of wane on it. You're like, I'll get there. I'm like working on it. But with hypnosis, it's so much faster. It's just an instant kind of thing when you've been working on it and your brain is like, yep, we know how to do this. So that's super cool. I love that.
Yeah, and I fully agree. There's nothing more painful than sitting on the fence when it comes to making a change in your life. It's much better to hop down to one side or the other, and then just deal with the consequences or adjust course as you move along. So I really agree with you there, Jackie. And yeah, it is a matter of your view of the world, your perception of the world. Expectations have a way of becoming reality. The self-fulfilling prophecy is not a myth. It's
Oh.
very much real and scientifically documented, right?
Mhm.
And I love the caffeine withdrawal examples because as somebody that works in this industry, I go and I read people's accounts of what it's like for them to quit things like caffeine or quit things like nicotine or whatever, and the experiences that they go through. And to me, just my perception, it seems obvious that they go into these situations expecting to feel deprived, and
Right.
that feeling of deprivation can manifest in what people assume are withdrawal physical symptoms when they may not otherwise have existed had they had a different mindset, right? And I know this
Right.
because I've experienced it personally.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Enjoy not drinking caffeine anymore. How many days has it been?
It's been since November 10th last year, so
Wow.
that's pretty much it for me. It's a permanent change at this point.
And you just don't feel anything. Do you feel like apathetic towards caffeine now?
Yeah, I'm indifferent. Actually,
Yeah.
when I decided to not need it anymore, I have one of those Tassimo machines at my house. Those pod
Yeah.
coffee machines, and I've got it's next to next to my desk in my home office, and I've got like 2 full packages of coffee, like it's there with a clean mug sitting in it, and I look at it every day, and there's no temptation, there's no regret, there's no like there's not even like the awareness is like, oh, I shouldn't let this coffee go to waste, like nothing like that, and
Yeah.
although logically I know that I'll give it to somebody who wants it, but no, it's just been from the moment I made the shift, I felt great. And on speaking specifically to caffeine, I sleep better than I have in years. I wake up early feeling great. There's so many, I'm not here to preach about the dangers of caffeine.
No.
It's actually kind of a taboo topic. However, I think there's a lot of benefits to be explored in that area.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking more about hypnotherapy and what it's really like, because it is such an amazing tool. And I hope more people will jump on it and contact you. So, how can people find you?
So the best way to find me these days is through Instagram at Ryan Montis NLP. Perhaps you'd like to put a link in your Instagram so people can find it more easily. Yeah. And my website, which will just direct you back to Instagram, is www.ryanmontis.com.
Perfect. Yes. Everything will be in the links below. They'll be all tagged. There's no way you can't find Ryan. All right. Well, thank you so much.